Kareem, amma ba'd, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our second session where we are just taking questions or people can just ask things that they may think is relevant or interesting, and we can try and provide a suite of answers that can help them. Or people are just looking for some sort of moral guidance or some sort of inspiration. We can try and help them. So this is like a half an hour for me and for yourselves to get to know each other. لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that's important to bear in mind. Allah mentions in the Quran that we've created you in different ways, different colors, different shapes, different sizes, if you like, so that you may get to know one another. So please do send your questions in, and I'm happy to try and answer them. There's been a lot happening. A lot of you will be back at school, going back to school next week. Parents will be busy. Parents may be relieved to have their children back at school. Some parents, like me, will prefer to have their children at home. So I hope that everything goes well for everyone next week. Remember that the ultimate education of your child lies with you as a parent. So we are responsible for the education of our children. That's very important to remind ourselves that ultimate responsibility for our children lies with us. So we need to be aware of what they're learning, whether that's at the mosque or whether that's at school, or even now, what they are watching on the internet and on TV. So making sure that you have full knowledge of the sort of content that your child is being exposed to. And remember that our spiritual masters tell us that what enters your heart through your eyes, for example, or what you hear from what you to eating, all of these things impact upon your spirituality. So that's one needs to be aware that what they watch is very, very important. Allah mentions in the Quran, قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون. And Allah also says in the Quran, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتُهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ لَهُمْ. So one should very much guard their gaze, their eyes. Allah also talks about what we eat. كُلُوا مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَاعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا. That eat of that which is good and perform righteous actions. Performing righteous actions comes from a clean heart. So you are impacted by what enters you, not just through uh, physical nourishment, but also through what you're taking in from your eyes, from your ears, and those are the main vehicles through which certain things enter into you. So one needs to be very, very careful about this. Masir has asked a question. How do you, as a parent, let's see if I can share it. Is it showing? I don't know if it's showing. How do you, as a parent, free will and putting it into them into choices? So Masih, that's a really good question, and it's all about your success. It's all about you, and you see this in marriage quite a lot. When people get married, they often complain that, or they don't get married. Some people don't hold back getting married, or when potentials come to them, they say, "Oh, she's not quite what I wanted, or he's not quite what I wanted." What they're really doing is reflecting their expectations onto them. They haven't reached the sense of success that we are all as individuals expected to succeed at. That's a modernist paradigm today. Whereas in the Sharia, marriage is not about perfection. You marry someone because you want to draw closer to your creator with them, i.e., you want to seek perfection with a spouse. But going back to your question, Masjid, one of the best ways that you can do this, and the key way, is to embody what you want to see in your children. What do I mean by that? You show to them day in, day out, all the time, what it means to be a good person. you practice your faith. You get up for Fajr, you're honest, you live an honest life, you treat your wife well, your husband well, your children well, you treat everyone with respect and dignity. In other words, you practice your faith because children observe and learn by observing, not just by reading books. Nowadays, we just teach a lot of books and just fill them with information. Literally, we make them memorize books, but we don't teach them how to live. The spiritual masters, our ulama, our mashayikh, we would live with them, would spend time with them, and we would learn manners in their suhbah. So, suhbah, companionship is very, very important. The second thing is that we should spend time with our children talking about our faith, not in your face way, but in a way that makes sense to them. So talking about Allah, talking about a prophet, talking about what it means to be a good human being. And so having those conversations, exploring your religion with your child is very important. Every parent, I've argued this before, should set aside at least 15 to 20 minutes every evening with their child. And you're just sitting with them. If you have boys, sitting with them. If you have girls, you sit with them. And you should do that as a family event, i.e., all of you are sat together doing this act. And then you guide them. You don't make the decisions for them, but you let them know that the decision is yours, but I'm going to give you the tools to make those decisions. Because we live in a world now where you can't enforce things. So you have to find creative ways of making sure your child makes the right choices. Otherwise, what happens sometimes is parents are too strict and the child rebels. It's about finding that middle ground. The third thing is also understanding basic human biology. As children get older, their bodies will change. I have three daughters, and I'm continuously reminded by my wife that they will go through changes. The girls will go through changes. They will have mood swings, or this will happen, or that will happen to them. And as a parent, I need to be attentive towards that as well, and also making sure that there are certain times when there will be a lot of pressure. So how do I manage that as a parent? Finding time with them, reading with them, studying with them, all these things are very, very important. Another thing you can do, which is very, very effective, is spending time with your children by going out on a weekend with them. So whether that's going for a walk, cycling, taking them out with you to places, getting them to experience your life, so that they really learn what it's like to become an adult at a young age. So I hope that's been useful, Masir, and that helps inshallah. And of course, the most important thing is dua, praying to Allah, supplicating to Allah that Allah guides our children. I really do believe that if we give our children the right type of tarbiyah and education, they will come out to become very, very strong and exemplary individuals. And as they get older, making sure they have a mentor, a role model. Children need role models. Human beings, I think the word we use in English called mimesis, which is that we learn from other people. We learn from people that we think are better than us. So if your child is not being exposed to a very good role model, their role model might be someone on TV, or their role model might be someone who's not really a good role model. So making sure that you find good role models for your children to spend time with, whether that's an alim or someone who's just very active in the community, who's just very, 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 very much engaged doing lots of things. So that's some tips for you, Masih. Hopefully that will help, inshallah ta'ala. We're just waiting for some more questions to come through. Inshallah, we can take them. We have okay. So another thing here is about being organized, um, and having control over your time. A lot of people struggle with this, primarily because they're not focused. Having a set of achievable targets is very, very important. So I always advise people is to have a tartib, have a routine, maybe even write it down that on a certain morning I'm going to do this first. I'm going to get up at this time. But how do I make sure I wake up at this time? Well, I need to go sleep. So you work backwards. I need to make sure I go to sleep. Well, how do I make sure I go to sleep on time? I make sure my phone is switched off by 9:30, or I make sure I've had my meal by 6:30 in the evening. So therefore, I'm not going to sleep with a full stomach. So having a tartib is very, very important. When do I check my messages? So some of us, we have an obsession with our little devices, and we're always glued to our devices. Well, maybe having times where you put it in one room and you only check WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever at certain times during the day, or you log onto the internet for half an hour a day, and you set yourself these targets. Now, what I do personally is when I'm working, even when I'm working, on my laptop, I set myself a 50-minute clock, and it times, and when it reaches 50 minutes, a bell rings to tell me that I should go for a break. That's because when you get to my age, you need to rest more. So after 10 minutes, 50 minutes, I'll stop, I'll go for a walk, or I'll do something in the house, and I get back to work. And I do that to help keep me focused as well. So this is useful as well. So having it written down and letting people know this is your tertib, and also building in your family into that. So you might spend time with your mom and dad or with your children. So building a schedule is very, very useful. You find very, very quickly that you're productive. For example, I set myself 3 blocks of 50 minutes blocks to write every day. So that's all I do, nothing less, nothing more. So I wake up in the morning and I'll do 50 minutes each of 3 blocks of writing. No matter how much I write, how less I write, I've done that. So I feel like I've done something. And then I do other things around it as well. Um, so I hope that's been useful. Here's a question from someone, we don't have their name, but hopefully it'll show. Um, how would a prospective or budding student knowledge build a solid foundation? There's nothing more useful and more important than learning, if you're learning the Islamic sciences, to learn the basic sciences really, really strong. So you need to know Arabic really, really well. You need to know usul very, very, very well. You need to know mantiq very, very well. You need to know balagha really, really well. Learn these basic sciences really, really well, so that when you go to advanced texts like the Hidayah or a book on tafsir or something, it's easy for you. You're able to master those texts. I think I mentioned maybe last time, I can't remember, there was a teacher called Mawlana Mi'raj Haq. He's a teacher of my teacher. So I have a teacher called Mufti Ikramul Haq Sahab, who is the Imam of a masjid here, a very pious man. And his teacher was someone called Mawlana Mi'raj Haq. He taught in Deoband. He was a senior scholar there. And once Mawlana Abdullah Kaprod, he asked him that what is it about, what have you noticed in terms of students? What weaknesses have you noticed? And he said 2 things. He said one thing is that we take on students who are too young into madrasas now, so they're not intellectually ready, they're not mature enough to be able to grasp all these complex learning that they have to do. And the second thing is that they don't learn the basic sciences really, really well. So when they get to advanced texts, because he was a master in Hidayah, for example, which is a difficult text, I have it here. This book is very, very important in Hanafi Mazhab. One must master it to become a really good jurist. Um, he says that students are weak because they haven't learned these sciences properly. So learning these are very, very, very good, and staying focused. Don't get distracted. Learn them really well, and I promise you, later on in life or when you get to advanced text, it will help you a lot. It will help you unlock a lot of text, and it can be very, very difficult. But if you have good teachers, solid teachers who are very passionate about mantiq, teaching logic, or teaching you balagha, rhetoric, then that's very, very useful. And there are some very, very good books in English now. When we were students, we never had access to these books. There's some very, very good books that are written by ulama in the West, that are very much accessible. And I can mention some if you want, but they are very, very useful. So hopefully that will help. Next one is by someone called Waqar. Assalamu alaikum. Last week you discussed the need to unlearn the programming of modernity that one inevitably exposed to. How can we protect it? Okay, so the first thing, Waqar, is you need to learn it yourself. There are a number of books that can help you unlock that. I'll just mention two. Fortunately, I have a book. So a good book to read is this one. The pictures are a little bit inappropriate, but the content is very, very important. As you can see, I've read the book quite a lot. It's called The Theological Origins of Modernity. The Theological Origins of Modernity. Very, very important book. That will help. Another one is a little bit more easy to read. So that's why I'm recommending this one. It's called Why Liberalism Failed by Pratik Janeem. Of course, Muslims haven't really written much on this. So you can see how it all comes about. And then learning basic aqidah. So what you're doing is you're learning what's the false ideologies, but then you're inputting what Islamic belief is. Another very good book, which is, I guess, really good for Muslims, and I think every Muslim, to be honest, should read this book, is this one, uh, Promulgana to the Metaphysics of Islam, by Naqib al-Attas. Very much an important book. That's a really good. Every Muslim should have this book at home, and they should be reading this book. We'll try and maybe add references later on, so you can have access to those books as well, inshallah ta'ala. And so, rather than reading books to your children, what you need to do is read it yourself. digest it, and then conceptualize it for your children. Because children don't read books, at least at this level. This is too difficult for a child to read. But parents should be reading these books and should be aware of these arguments. Okay. Shaheen has asked a question. Is this a general question answer session or a specific? This is just a general one. Specific ones you can email in. This isn't like a fatwa council or something. This is just an opportunity for people to explore things. You have your local ulama, you have your local muftis, who you should always go to in the first instance. I'm a big believer from my own teachers, who are great muftis. They've always said that when it comes to complex legal questions, and it's contextual, you should go to your local alim or build a relationship with local alim and local mufti that you trust, and you should take knowledge from them. And even better, that you learn yourself. You learn the sciences yourself. All right. So I'm just putting that there. Uh, so that's Shaheen's question. Someone did ask about the beard. I'm not going to go into too much. There was a question that we received on the email. Um, People have different positions on this, even in the Hanafi madhab. My advice to people is research it yourself. Ask people, read, learn Arabic, learn the text, learn the fiqh, and try and come to your own conclusion. And then go and also ask local ulama that you are in touch with. I think the basic point, as always, when it comes to legal matters, especially things that require ijtihad, i.e., they're not like clearly mentioned in the text, like the Quran, these things, then one should not attack or become a wolf devouring other people. People's positions should be respected, especially if they're people of knowledge. People of knowledge, that they can have different positions, they can have different views on things, and these positions should be respected. I am at the moment writing something on it. I am doing some research on it, and my method usually is I write things down. So I'll write something, I'll publish something, and then people can read it and see the complex nature of what needs to be discussed, and then they can come to their own conclusions. That's a scholarly way, right? Otherwise, people will just argue and debate all day long. There's a reason why we have millions of books in Islamic tradition, because it's a conversation. So the bottom line is that positions that people hold should be respected, as long as it's a legitimate position that can be held by someone within the Islamic tradition. I'm just logging back on here. I've lost the connection a little bit. Um, so those are important things to be aware of. And if you really want to study fiqh and you really want to study these things, I always tell people, learn Islam, learn a religion yourself. There's nothing better, more empowering than being able to access um, the Quran yourself, access the Hadith yourself. Right? That's very, very important. All right. Masih come back with a question. How do you gain the ability to see your own mistake? Number one, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show you the things as they really are. Allahumma aril haqqa haqqa warzuqna Allahumma aril haqqa haqqa. Allah, allow us to see the truth for what it really is. And this requires a Ghazalian exorcism, if you like, which is that you look deep within yourself and you look at what is good about you and you praise Allah, and you find within yourself things that are weak, and you ask Allah to strengthen you, and you ask Allah to forgive you from that. No one is perfect except the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every one of us is prone to making mistakes, making errors, nisyan. Sometimes we can make an error, sometimes we can forget, but we ask Allah to always keep us in a state of dhikr, not to only just remember Him, but also in a state that He reminds us. Allah reminds us of our errors as well. And one should have the humility to accept their faults. If you made a mistake, you said something wrong, you've done something wrong, then one should be able to accept that mistake. But that always comes from humility, tawadu. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man tawadha lillah rafa'ahu Allah." Whoever has humility, whoever is a humble person, Allah will elevate that person. The Prophet ﷺ was extremely humble. If you read the Shama'il, he was a very shy person, and he wasn't loudly spoken. He didn't shout. He didn't attack people. He was very measured in his speech. And this reminds me of something that's very important today as well. That when we're engaging with people, especially Muslims, there should be a sense of adab. It should be done with respect, with courtesy, We don't need to shout at each other. We can talk with each other. We can have conversations. This is what Muslims were good at. Okay, uh, let's go back. Recently, at my masjid, I had respectful discussion regarding women and their place in the masjid. They were against for regular salah. Is this a redundant view? I don't know what you mean by redundant view. So you have to explain that. I mean, generally the fuqaha say, the jurists say that women should pray at home. Like if you read the fiqh text, and they get the same reward. So Allah's made it easy for them. But it would make sense that if a woman does need to pray because she's traveling or she's out with her family, then they should have space for them. But the jurists usually say that women should pray at home. But masjids nowadays, especially in the West, should have facilities for women to pray if they are traveling or if they need to. But the best place for a woman is to pray at home or to be at home. Al-Abbas, mashallah. What are you currently working on? So I'm working on a number of things. One of them is a deep dive into fiqh. I've written a paper which is coming out soon on how the Hanafi mazhab has a strong rational element, but they are Salafi in that they look at the early practice. They are very they try to they maintain a strong relationship with the Quran. They're very literal in their appreciation of Quran, and they also look at the amal and the practice of the companions. That's very, very important, and early Jewish as well. So I look at a number of masail to do with purification, what breaks wuzu. I look at the person who collects tax at the border, the ashir, and a few masail like that. I'm also looking at a few other topics, but if you know me, I'm very slow in promoting, or very slow in publishing things, because I just spend a lot of time trying to really get to the bottom of certain matters. Um, the Imams were against it. Yeah, you have to talk to the Imam. Maybe they have some reasons for it. Um, in some masajid they have it, some masajid they don't. Um, I guess that's up to the management. Sometimes it's purely because they don't have the facilities, they don't have the space, they don't feel it's a need. So there could be a number of reasons. I mean, a mosque that's in a city or near a shopping center might have different ways of serving the community. The mosque should serve the community, as opposed to a mosque that's in a place where it's very quiet and they don't need that. Okay. So I go, oh, this is a deep question. Do you matter believe that certain moral maximum may be reached pure reason? If so, yeah, I'd have to look back at this, but there are certain things that, for example, husn qub, good and evil. So this is a big question. Can you know good and evil outside of revelation, or does revelation need to come to confirm that? Right. So it's something, basically, it's something good because of something intrinsic to it, or is something good because God says it is good or bad? So there's a slight difference between Asharis Maturidis on that. You can read up on that, inshallah ta'ala. Some books on tasawwuf. Abdul Aziz, tasawwuf is something that you learn from suhbah, you learn from mashayikh, you drink with the mashayikh, if you like. It's not something that you read the ingredients on. You have to drink it, right? You can observe the ingredients all day long, but until you don't drink from tasawwuf spirituality, one will never know what spirituality is. And spirituality is passed on through the suhbah of mashayikh. But you can also read books on tasawwuf. Most of my reading in tasawwuf, or understanding of tasawwuf, a lot of it has come from the suhbah of pious people in our communities who I've sat with, or who I think are role models for me in my spirituality. Maybe not in other matters, um, but I feel that they're a sheikh kamil, they're a perfect sheikh in their spiritual journey. In our era of spiritual waywardness or backwardness, I think it's more important that you have an alim who's accomplished, who's knowledgeable, who practices, who does the zikr, azkar, and you keep sohbat with them. Very, very important, especially in our day and age, because otherwise every man is onto his own. So hopefully, inshallah, Abdulaziz, you'll find someone. And your surname is Noor there, so Allah will bless you with light. Um, Yeah, that's a valid argument, Shaheen. So you can make the argument to say, well, for mental health, sense of community, these are not legal arguments. They are social arguments, but they are still valid arguments that the Sharia would entertain. So yeah, you could make those arguments, and I think I've talked about this before. We don't need to be like either or. We can work out a system where it works. You're welcome, Shaheen. Barakallah fikum. Uh, You're welcome, ZM. But these are things that you can read up in Kalam text. So under Husn Qub, Shah Waliullah Dehlavi, who we are studying privately in Hujrullah al-Baligha, talks about this. But this is like a theological question. Um, Shaheen asks, I love Sira. What do you think is the best Sira book in English? So when I was young, I read Martin Ling's. There's questions around its authenticity. What's the book called? Muhammad life stories on his life from the earliest sources. That book for me was deeply moving because I love good writing, and it's well written. So that's a good book that I read. I actually read that in Haram when I was in Makkah. I actually read it. I shed tears when I was reading it. Um, so that's like a good book, just as a basic outline. Maulana Idris Kandilwi has a book in 3 volumes on the Seerah as well, and we'll share, inshallah, we'll share the resource on that as well. Dr. Yasir Qadi, I haven't read it, but he has one based on his lectures. Maulana Abul Hassan Nadwi has a book which has been translated English by Turaf Publishing. That's very, very detailed. That's worth looking at. So we can send you, inshallah, all of these. We can put these in the comments or at the end of the video for you to read. Those are books that I've read, and then there's lots in English, in Arabic as well. But those are, I think, sufficient for one to read. Seerah is very, very important. One should read the Seerah. Um, Masih is asking me a question. How do you deal with ulama? Ooh, in question, in okay, or students' knowledge. I don't know, Masih. That's a question that I can't answer. Um, who have closed mindsets or in a bubble. Um, there's nothing I can do. I mean, you can just make dua, and all you can do is, I guess, um, some people like that particular attitude, but from my teachers, it's about exploration. It's about asking questions. My teacher, a senior mufti, said, I want you to become a better teacher than me. I want you to go into things. I want you to research things. But that comes from your teachers, from the people that you associate yourself with. Oh, Shaheen, mashallah. Aqidah Tahawiyah was a very good series. Yes. You know what? I need to complete that. Inshallah, make dua. I have a problem, Shaheen. I start things and I don't finish them. So because I get so many ideas, my brain works like that. So I do need to finish them. Make dua, keep pushing me, keep reminding me, keep harassing me, and maybe one day we'll carry on, we'll get it finished, inshallah ta'ala. Oh, this is a complex question. So theological leanings. I think he was just a genius in of himself. I mean, people like Shah Waliullah, Ghazali, all of these greats. Um, we try to put them in a box, but because they were so multifaceted in their writing, it's like 1 minute you think, oh, haha, I've caught you. I know you're like this, you're following this particular persuasion, and next minute they'll take a different position. And I think that's perfectly legitimate for great scholars to do. You'll find that in great scholars, that they don't always fit into a particular neat category, and we can live with that as Muslims. We've done that for 12 centuries. We've been able to live with diversity. We've been able to keep diversity within certain parameters. What we do in the modern days, and it's a form of modernity, is we try and talk about unity. Everybody should be the same. Everybody should dress the same, eat the same, pray the same, everything. Whereas what we did from very early on is we developed a methodology where we said we're going to keep all this diversity within certain parameters within ourselves. So we're going to have an inclusive form of diversity, right? That's very, very important. This sounds very this sounds very odd to modern Muslims because we all want everything to be orthodox, everything to be exactly the same. But if you read the books very, very carefully, I mean, even if you read books of fiqh, very early on, Imam Abu Hanifa, you'll notice Imam Abu Yusuf, Imam Muhammad, students will say something different, Imam Zufar will say something different. This is how they worked. But it didn't destroy the school, it made the school richer. Okay. Uh, Sheikh starting things, not finishing is how we all are. Yeah. You start something, Masir, and somebody might take it on their benefit. I mean, I don't think anything that I've ever done when it comes to my deen, inshallah ta'ala, has ever been wasted. I've had students who've done a bit of Arabic and they've moved on, and you meet them 2 years later and they've been to Azhar or they've been to Egypt and they've come back. And I think, Alhamdulillah, you know what? I was on that journey with them. Labas, Yeah, so I think after usul al-shashi, we'll do some advanced usul al-fiqh. That's really, really important. But in some of my shorter videos, I'm trying to do that through the masail as well to show that the mazhab it's a beautiful pattern. It needs to come together. So that's my lifetime mission. Make dua, I get long life, and Allah puts barakah in my time that I can write books and I can do more research to help people. Alhamdulillah, that's something that I would like to do. So make dua for me, inshallah ta'ala. Thank you very much. That's such a compliment, Shahid. And we've got a good team here who are supporting us. And so we hope to produce more useful content bi'iznillahi ta'ala. And there are other people out there that you can listen to as well who produce very good content. One of the reasons that we are on YouTube is to reach out to people. It's easy for me to sit in my little office here, and it's actually very comfortable to read books. I mean, if you look at my desk, it's just full of books. And I love reading, but what use is knowledge if you can't help people, if you can't benefit people? So knowledge is there to benefit people. And I've got people around me who, mashallah, take care of a lot of the content production. You can tell from the way we do our work, it's very much rooted in Islamic tradition. Because, alhamdulillah, I've had the benefit of having some excellent teachers who I still study with. And of course, I still teach madrasa education, but I also work in academia. It gives me, alhamdulillah, some advantages in certain ways. And I've had some very good teachers. I still have very good teachers. And I'm always happy to learn from anyone and everyone because that's the way of Muslims. Muslims always took the best from what was around them, and I'm sure you can all that as well. ZM, yeah, that's very useful, helpful. Thank you. Yeah, so Aqidah, inshallah, we can do more of that. Uh, you mentioned that people are too early to go to madrasa. Hifz, the thing with Hifz is useful. I did Hifz. My daughter's doing it. Make dua she completes because what it does is it gives you the ability to recall verses instantly. So when you're thinking about a question or you're thinking about something, immediately you can recall that verse. That's what scholars were able to do. They were able to bring all these verses together. So Hifz is very, very important. But Hifz is memorization. The next stage after memorization should be to understand. So one should not stop at only memorization because your mind is young and your mind is clean. It's a tabula rasa. It's very clean. It's got nothing on it, and you're like a sponge at a young age. You can memorize very, very quickly because you don't have all the your mind's not being corrupted by everything else. Uh, Also, would you recommend any UK or Bro madrasa? UK, we have some good ones. You have to look at what works for you. Abroad, what works for you as well. Always send your child with the intention that they will become a strong alim or alima and that they will benefit the ummah and they will become a scholar par excellence. You want your children to become great scholars, thinkers, people who can do great work and work at a very high level. So make dua for your children to become like that. Have high aspirations for them. Remind them of that duty as well. What is your favorite tafsir? My favorite tafsir is no surprise. It's Imam Razi's Mafatih al-Ghaib. I love that because of the type of mind that I have. Um, Ma'rif al-Quran by Mufti Shafi is excellent. For people who don't know Arabic, or even people who know Arabic, even ulama, I would say Ma'rif al-Quran by Mufti Shafi is amazing. Like I dip into it every now and then, and I always find something useful. So may Allah bless Mufti Shafi, the father of Mufti Taqi. I would strongly recommend everyone has the copy of that and should read from that regularly. Uh, must see, in terms of madrasas, you're asking me about Darul Ulum. Um, the thing with madrasas and Darul Ulums is that they will give you the basics. And if they're good, they will give you a good training in the basics. They won't train you to become a scholar, i.e., someone who can do high level scholarship, but they will give you enough tools to be able to do that. So you need to find a madrasa where your child goes and your child comes out with a strong foundation in their religious sciences, right? That's the purpose. They should be able to do fiqh at a very basic level really well. They should be able to read Arabic fluently and be able to break down the sentences. They should be able to do logic really well. They should be able to do these basics so that as they mature, they're able to do independent research and become a real scholar. That's what I would say. Yeah, so hopefully that's been useful. I don't know if I'm relaxed, all these questions being thrown at me, but I try to be relaxed. My students know that I do have a relaxed atmosphere. I am serious when it comes to doing serious work. But like I was saying to one of my friends here, that everything is contextual. When it comes to being relaxed, like the Prophet ﷺ was with his wives and children, then he was relaxed. When it comes to preaching and doing religion, doing a bayan, then we're strict. Or when it comes to teaching in the classroom, so everything is contextual. We were talking about clothing before, that if you're in a masjid, like on YouTube, maybe you can wear your thobe and you should dress in a religious way. But if you're out cycling or you're out with your family walking, you can't expect everyone to dress in religious garb, right? We're quite flexible in that way. So we have to practice our faith with that level of freedom, but also with that level of openness and tolerance. This is very, very important in our day and age. Al-Abbas, when studying Maliki Usul, I heard that Ahnaf have a bottom approach, so that rather than diving into social law and then looking at the bottom, they will start with the Masail. No, that's not entirely true, Al-Abbas. Um, what they do is, because it's a case-based method, all the cases you have to trace back to the original case, which always go back to the Quran and Sunnah. Okay. Um, so it's kind of like it's a chicken and egg thing. Some people debate that they had the usul first and then the furu came. Some people say the furu came and the usul came later. What I do in my reading and my research is I try and bring them both together. Um, so yeah, the Hanafis have a very different approach to the other three mazahib when it comes to sources. It's a very different approach, and that needs to be repeated quite often. Okay, I think we're well over time. Please do keep your questions coming in. It's been wonderful spending half an hour with you guys on a Friday afternoon. I do apologize. Next week, I'm not here. I'm in Berlin for a conference in Germany. So I don't think I'll have time, but we will meet in a fortnight's time. Bi'iznillahi ta'ala. As always, keep in touch, keep sharing your content, keep sharing your questions, and I will see you all soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.